These are Apple's two cheapest MacBooks, the entry-level $999 MacBook Air and the $1,299 MacBook Pro. These are both new releases. They have better keyboards, more storage, and in some cases, better performance. So what we're going to do today is figure out which one of these is right for you. In recent years, the entry-level MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air were extremely similar. Up until July of 2019, they both had dual cores, butterfly keyboards, the same resolution display, two Thunderbolt ports. They were very, very similar. But now there are some pretty noticeable differences between the two, and each have their advantages depending on what you want to do with them. Now, to start this video, let's go through and talk about what's different about these two computers, because externally they look very, very similar. They have the exact same footprint, the same display size, the same bezels. They're very nearly the same weight, although the MacBook Pro is a little bit heavier because it has a uniform thickness where the MacBook Air is tapered. Now, one of the quality of life differences that you might notice is the tapered design of the MacBook Air does actually make it ever so slightly more comfortable to type on because the top case is slanted ever so slightly, so it makes it a little more comfortable for resting your wrists, although you won't find the MacBook Pro to be uncomfortable by any means. Similarly, the weight on the MacBook Pro is barely noticeable. If you're actually lifting both of them, I mean, I can tell kind of that the MacBook Pro is heavier, but it certainly wouldn't make a difference to me if I didn't have them side by side. These, for all intents and purposes, are equally portable. The only other real functional difference is that the MacBook Pro has a touch bar and the MacBook Air does not. Now, regardless of your opinion on the touch bar, some people hate it, some people find it useful, some people don't really care. I wouldn't base your purchase decision on the touch bar. If you absolutely despise the touch bar, but you need extra performance from quad cores, don't let that stop you from buying a MacBook Pro. Base your decision on the actual functionality of the machine because it's easier to ignore a touch bar than deal with a dual-core i3. So before we talk about those internal differences, there's one more thing that is worth noting, and that is the speaker and microphone. Now, I don't know why, but Apple didn't really give the speaker and mic array the same treatment that they gave to the MacBook Air. The MacBook Air has excellent speakers and fantastic microphones, but the MacBook Pro is pretty much the same as the model that it replaced. Now, if you haven't seen my video, I do think that the speakers in this computer are better than the 2019 13-inch MacBook Pro by a noticeable amount, but the microphone is actually a little bit worse, which doesn't make any sense at all, and both of them pale in comparison to the MacBook Air. So here's a sound test for the speakers on both of these computers. So you may have noticed that not only does the MacBook Air sound better, it's also a lot louder. Those were at the same half volume preset, and the MacBook Air was a lot louder than the Pro. Now let's do a comparison between the webcams and microphones of these two computers. So here's an audio and video test between the 2020 MacBook Pro and the 2020 MacBook Air. Now this should be a bit of an interesting test because on paper, at least, you would expect that for $300 more than the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro should sound and look a little bit better. Now, to my eye, I don't really see a difference between the webcam quality. They're both pretty bad, if I'm honest. They're not very good. However, the microphone on the MacBook Air from what I've seen, is actually better than that on the MacBook Pro, and that's because Apple didn't really change the microphone, whereas on the MacBook Air, they did. So that's a little bit strange. It's no competition. The microphone on the 13-inch MacBook Pro kinda sucks. So basically, if you are only looking for a multimedia Zoom computer, right? You're gonna watch videos, do some Skype calls. The webcam on the MacBook Air sucks, but the speaker and microphone make this a really, really nice option. So for me personally, whenever I'm listening to music on the MacBook Air, I don't even bother getting like a Bluetooth speaker. These internal speakers are really, really solid. You can fill a medium-sized room if you put these up to higher volume, and they don't get crackly or distorted at high volumes, which is really nice. So if that's all you're looking for, just a computer to browse the web and listen to music and stuff, the MacBook Air has much better speakers. Now there is one area where the MacBook Pro will win every single time, and that is performance. That is what this machine is designed to do, and what this machine is not designed to do. You see, the MacBook Pro has this really cool feature. So there's a CPU inside of this machine, and on top of that CPU are these metal pipes. And what they do is they draw the heat away from the CPU. And then there's a bunch of little fins of metal and a fan. And what the fan does is blow air through those fins and thus remove heat from the case and from the CPU. Now that's an innovative technology called a cooling system. And the MacBook Air doesn't have that. The MacBook Air has a fan and it has a heatsink, but those two things are completely separate and not connected, so what is even the point? Once you start taxing this MacBook Air, even the nicer ones with the quad-core processors, once it gets to 100 degrees Celsius, which is the T-junction of the CPU, it's basically like, oh god, oh no, I don't know how to stop this. How do we cool it down? And it's just not a good situation. You're gonna run your CPU really hot, and you're gonna lose a ton of performance. But Luke, you say, the MacBook Air has a 10th gen Core i3, the MacBook Pro has an 8th gen Core i5. Surely the fact that the i3 is newer means that they're not that far off. Well, why don't we do a Cinebench R20 shootout, and we'll see how close these two machines are. This ought to be an interesting battle. It's not close at all. The MacBook Pro is pretty much twice as powerful as the MacBook Air. So for $300 extra, you're doubling your performance. That's a pretty good trade-off. Now you may also be wondering, but wait a minute, the Core i5 version is a quad core in the MacBook Air, and the Core i5 in the MacBook Pro is a quad core, so wouldn't those two be more comparable? No, not really. The quad core MacBook Air scores about 950 in Cinebench, whereas the MacBook Pro is almost at 1600, so it's still not even close. In these configurations, the storage and RAM are the same, the graphics are going to be very similar, and basically, your difference at that point is the processor and the extra horsepower in the MacBook Pro. However, there is something very interesting, and that is that the higher tier version of the MacBook Air, the $1,299 version, is the exact same price as the base model MacBook Pro. And that's actually very interesting because you see, as we've talked about, the MacBook Pro is going to be more powerful. That is undeniable. However, at that price point, the MacBook Air comes with the quad-core i5, which is better than the dual-core at least, 8GB of LPDDR4X RAM, and a 512GB solid-state drive. At $1,300 for both of these machines, you can go for performance on the Pro, or you can go for more storage on the Air. And that really fits into the way Apple positions these two computers. The MacBook Pro has a clear emphasis on power. Who would have thought with a name like MacBook Pro? Whereas the MacBook Air is an Ultrabook. That's what it's designed for. If you're watching this video and you don't know what quad-core means, or you're buying a computer as a gift for someone who really doesn't even know what a quad-core processor is, you probably don't need the MacBook Pro. You are probably going to be fine with the MacBook Air. Might as well save some money. Because the thing is, it might look like the MacBook Air is a bad value. This dual-core i3 is half as good as the older i5 in the MacBook Pro. But if you're not someone who's going to be launching any demanding applications, much less utilizing the full potential of quad-core processors, then why spend the extra money? And that's all very intentional. Apple creates and prices their products specifically for certain types of people. And to be perfectly honest, part of the reason why people who don't exactly know what they're looking for will spend money they don't need to spend on the MacBook Pro is because they'll be doing some research and they'll stumble across some discussion board and they'll see people talking about how ridiculous it is to have a Core i3 and a $1,000 laptop, and they'll think, oh, I don't know, maybe the Core i3 is not good enough. But that's exactly why this machine exists. The MacBook Air, especially the base model MacBook Air, is designed to be a macOS machine with absolutely nothing extra. The MacBook Pro, on the other hand, does all of that same stuff, but it also throws in the ability to work it a little bit harder. For example, this video and the last video where I compared the 2020 to the 2019 MacBook Pro, both of these videos are edited in 4K 30 on this MacBook. No problem. All you gotta do is set your Final Cut to proxy media and it's smooth as butter. For reference, I did try to do some editing on the MacBook Air. I couldn't last. Like, it's doable. You can maybe scrape by, but man, the amount of dropped frames is ridiculous. It was like every other frame is just gone. So if you're making a decision between the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air, what it boils down to is, do you see yourself now or in the next couple of years doing something where you think you might tax your processor? If you don't, then the MacBook Air is probably going to suit you just fine, and you'll be able to save a little bit of money. On the other hand, if you want to dabble in some video editing, maybe do some Photoshop work, the MacBook Pro might be worth your time, even if you're not going to be taxing the full potential of the CPU, just to have better cooling and keep a machine that's not running at full tilt all the time. That might be worth it for you. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, if you want to describe your use case. We can help you guys figure out which of these is right for you. Also, if you're looking for any additional resources to help make a decision, feel free to follow me on Twitter @LukeMiani or check out my subreddit in the description below. There's a ton of people there waiting to help you out with your questions, so head over there. As usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And with that, I will see you all in the next video.